just know that you're really not.
Okay.
Wait, it's actually this pretty. Where is everybody?
Hi. How's it going? How's it going? Yeah. You can say yes. You can say woo. You can clap. Okay. Awesome. So if there were more people, we could get more data for these questions. But my first question is, in the LUG IRC channel, some people discussed getting stickers to cover up the little Windows sticker on your computer. You feel like a Linux user, that's kind of a cool thing. Is anyone in this room interested in stickers? Raise your hand if you are. I'm seeing 4 hands in mine. That's a 5th hand. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to talk to some different organizations. We might be able to get some free stickers from like the Linux Foundation or Unix stickers. So like domain name, whatever.
.tlb.
Whatever.
I wonder if that's actually a thing. .tlb.
There's some other websites that do stickers. If we do need to pay for them, they'll probably be between 50 cents and $1 per, unless we do a really big bulk. Also, we can just do that next term or whatever. So keep that in mind. So we can just bulk order like 50. Stickers are very cool. I like stickers.
I like stickers.
Shane, I can stop whatever I want.
Pro sticker.
Emily, who's not here, for Shane, had the idea of sharing cool projects that we found anytime, either this past week or just in general. Are there any cool things that we have found, cool tools that we like, that we're interested in? Sort of like Languages Night, but not. Have you found anything?
I actually learned a lot about Jekyll this week, which like isn't really a new tool, but like I got it to do things that I did not think I would be able to get it to do. So that was pretty exciting.
Cool. I actually found a cool tool. Can we use it?
Yeah. Just, I think.
VTop GitHub. I actually found a really cool. Am I clicking things?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Looks like that. It's actually pretty cool and super easy to set up. Basically, you just clone the repo and then you run make. If you have like npm installed, it just works. The one thing I learned about this from using it was that Node takes up a ridiculous amount of processor power. So yeah, learning experience.
So does Chrome apparently.
So does Chrome. Chrome is ridiculous. Anyway, so that's that. Are there any questions? Does anyone need to install Linux or just general questions? Oh, with that,
Yeah.
Well,
Jeff, already learned very soon.
Don't kill yourself.
Oh no. So just as a show of hands, like how many of you guys either have a website or want to make a website or have like an idea for a website? Maybe? Yeah. Wow, that's like almost everyone. And how many of you have heard of or used a static site generator before? Only one. Oh my gosh, this is actually so exciting. I thought this wasn't going to be relevant to anyone except me, and it is. Okay, so Jekyll and Pelican are both something called static site generators. What, you might ask yourself, is a static site generator? A static site, so I asked Google what a static site generator was, and it was like, I don't know. I'm not a static site generator. So I guess to break down the phrase, a static site is flat files or files that do not have any functionality. So like if you think of JavaScript, that is dynamic. That is going to change the content that your user sees as they see it. So that's an example of dynamic content. Static content is basically just like raw HTML most of the time. It's just like if you think of a blog and you think of a blog post, that blog post is pretty much static. Like, yeah, you can take it down from your website, but like it's not going to change. Your user can't interact with it beyond reading it. So that's kind of the idea of like sites that you interact with and that change versus sites where you're just consuming content.
Is a static site is something like a search engine, that whereas a static site generator is just mostly just content.
Yeah.
That doesn't change.
Exactly. The New York Times site is maybe a good example of something where, like, yeah, they're gonna have like a contact us page, but like for the most part, you're just reading. So that's what static sites kind of are, and then a generator as like a chunk of code that generates a static site. Usually, it's from a much simpler version of a markup language, for instance, for structured text or Markdown or Scribble or kind of whatever you want. Yeah, so basically SSGs are meant to like simplify the process of creating really basic sites or static sites. They don't have to be basic. So then another question that's kind of relevant to this topic is what makes a good static site generator. And this question is really kind of dependent on what your project is, what kind of needs you have, how you as a developer or a front-end engineer, like your knowledge, what you usually work with. For instance, if you are most familiar with Python, you're probably going to want to go with a static site generator that is written in Python, so that like your config file will be in Python. If you want to contribute to the static site generator, then you can actually do that feasibly. And you'll generally probably just have a better understanding of how it works. Whereas like if you're a little bit stronger in Ruby, then Jekyll might be a better option because it's written in Ruby. It also depends on your config file. Like certain static site generators will only support either YAML or different versions of config files. Like Pelican has a conf.py. Some other things are how it interacts with GitHub, or more broadly, where you're going to be deploying your site and how easy it is to deploy your site through that interface. So like if you're going to deploy it on GitHub pages, there's certain difficulties with deploying most static sites that are generated with GitHub, particularly if you're sharing them with a lot of people. So it's another thing you keep in mind. And then another thing that I thought was really important was how customizable it was. So for me, I tend to think of myself as a little bit of a designer. And so I know whenever I make a site, I'm pretty much not going to use the default theme. And how easy it is to add my own theming is something that's really important to me. So that may or may not be important to you. I guess another thing you keep in mind is like, how pretty does it look right out of the box? Like if you don't want to mess with any CSS, then it needs to be able to work so that you don't have to worry about the CSS. So that's another thing to keep in mind when thinking about like, how are you going to use your static site generator? Some things that other people found important. So actually this really cool website called slant.ch that essentially listed like 50 or so static site generators and the pros and cons of all of them. So from that, I just kind of looked at a couple of them and tried to decide what other people thought was really important when they were choosing a static site generator. One thing was how user-friendly it was. So there was a lot of people who said, like, I'm using a static site generator because I don't want to think about making this site. I just want this site to exist and to be able to get this content to people. I don't want to really worry about how it does that. So user-friendliness was one aspect that people found really important. Another was actually how well it worked with Windows. One of the biggest complaints about actually a lot of the static site generators that I really like was that they didn't work well with Windows, which I did not realize until I read this. So depending on your operating system, you might also keep that in mind. Are there any questions? Excellent. So then, talking more specifically about Jekyll and Pelican, let's look at like things that Jekyll does well. One of Jekyll's primary features, and one of the reasons that I think is one of the most popular static site generators, is that it works extremely well with GitHub Pages. In fact, GitHub Pages is built using Jekyll. So if you are really familiar with GitHub Pages or you want to use that to deploy your site, this is pretty much the only option. That's not necessarily true, but it is definitely the easiest. It's going to be the least headache of all of the options. Another thing is that it's really great for blogs. Everything has a timestamp, so every file you make needs to have a timestamp in front of your blog post title. And so I guess because of that, it kind of exemplifies how it lends itself very well to making blogs, or things that are really aware of time passing. So things like maybe a travel journal would be another really great instance where you'd want to keep track of when you were posting, and this would sort of force you to in a way, or ensure that you did. Another reason that it's really popular is that it's super user-friendly. It works really well out of the box. It has great documentation. Because it's so popular, a lot of people have used it, so pretty much any question you ask will probably have been answered on Stack Overflow, which makes it really helpful to have sort of these community documentation, as well as really good official docs. So that's something that it definitely really gets going for it, and that's actually really important, I think, with static site generators. So a lot of SSGs are just people's pet projects, and often with people's pet projects, they don't have great documentation, which is pretty understandable. Like, you're usually just kind of hacking away on something, and it's not really like your day job or what have you. So I think having really good documentation, being able to figure out why things aren't working, or being able to ask questions online is one of the best things about Jekyll. And another thing is that it's written in Ruby. There's a little Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow. Anyway, so things that Ruby or that Jekyll doesn't do well. Again, I found that it doesn't work very well on Windows. I don't know that I can really speak to that because I don't use it with Windows, but that was a complaint that a lot of people had. Another thing, particularly in comparing it to Pelican, is that it is not as configurable, or it's harder to configure. So basically, if you want to do anything that is outside of the defaults, especially in terms of functionality, you have to write a plugin or find a plugin, which can be a lot of overhead, even if you're just trying to do really simple things. Like, I was trying to make a list of all of the posts that had a particular category. And first of all, that was not a easy to do functionality based on the config file. I was going to have to write a plugin, and even just finding a plugin someone else had written that did it, and that did it how I kind of wanted it to, was surprisingly difficult as well. So just kind of basic settings and configurations like that can sometimes be unexpectedly difficult with Jekyll and aren't necessarily user-friendly. Yeah.
I was going to say, in my experience with Jekyll, I also had to do a very similar thing where I wanted to make an archive page, and that wasn't just built into the template I was using. To tag every post with archive, and then I had to have another page that looped through every post and checked if it had the archive tag, and then made a list of those. So it wasn't that hard. It was 3 lines of ERB code or whatever. Right. But it was still that's the thing that you want to do with the blog. So. Right. Yeah.
So is that is it, you said the documentation is pretty good though, so as far as figuring out where you need to put the code to make that happen with that?
Super easy, yeah. There's actually, when you run Jekyll make me a new site, whatever that command is, it'll add a whole bunch of different folders, one of which is _plugins. So it's already kind of set up, it's encouraging you to make plugins and add that functionality on your own. And yeah, the documentation will walk you through, here's an example plugin, here's all the things you need to make it work, here's how you should interact with all these different aspects of your site, such as posts. But at the same time, at least with Pelican, I can't really speak for other static site generators, but with something like Pelican, getting a list of posts is pretty trivial. It's literally just changing a adding a line to your configuration file. So I guess did that answer your question or?
Yeah, just wondering, because I know I've used like some other, I don't know, I tried using Drupal for a while and then just trying to figure out like the right place to change files and stuff without reading like, through the whole book. It was kind of difficult to, I don't know, it didn't give me enough, I guess, control. And figuring out how like someone else was thinking about it to, get to work was kind of a drawback to it, so.
Yeah, Drupal is a complex system. Like I agree. It's taken me a year and a half to really feel like I understand it. Whereas Jekyll, I learned it in like a weekend.
How long have you been using Jekyll? Because that's another Drupal that I know it's like it changed from version to version, and you had to edit a different file.
Yeah.
Could just been my experience too. But is it pretty good that way as far as like keeping the standard to where you can upgrade and it's not going to?
Yeah, I mean it's a much simpler tool than Drupal, so it kind of has that going for it. Where like there are very few changes I can think of that are really gonna like destroy you. In fact, you're more likely to have Ruby screw up whatever you're doing than have Jekyll itself as a tool mess whatever up. So yeah, I've only been using it for like a month or two, so I can't really speak to versioning. But I haven't heard of it being a problem.
Have you used it to take like a site that is dynamic and just make it static? Kind of like cache over it, because I'm guessing it'll a lot of like databases and stuff. Is it not really set up for that?
Okay. So the interface for making let's assume that Jekyll is just a blog tool, right? We'll just make that assumption because it mostly is. It's mostly just for blogs or blog-like websites. What you do is you make a set of .md files, markdown files. It does markdown, right?
Yeah.
And then it processes that markdown, which is like a standard way of formatting your text file, and it translates that into HTML. So that's how you do that. So it just pulls from a database directory of posts, and then it turns those into appropriate web pages. As far as updating, that's never been a problem for me. I'm using it for 6 months now for my main blog, and it's pretty silly easy to just add a blog post, and then it just builds it for you, and it just builds it for you. You just have your site all built out, and then you copy your build directory into whatever /bar/www for your personal website or GitHub pages, which is really convenient. So it's
so it sounds quite a bit simpler.
Yeah, I mean Drupal is an entire content management system, which includes a lot more things. It is a GUI where you can do text editing and choosing themes, and it actually does include a database. I have not seen a static site that includes a database. However, I'm sure they might exist.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's not.
Usually, if you're using a database, you have more information than an SSG can really handle.
Yeah.
And you're probably looking at a dynamic site anyway.
SSGs are really good if you want to host your website on a GitHub repo, right? And also going back, as far as customization, you said you learned it in a weekend.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty accurate. The documentation for getting started is super simple, and it's written in Ruby. So if you know Ruby and you do the getting started page, you kind of can just take that and run. I said I had to build my own archive page, but it took 20 minutes maybe. And that was that's including reading docs and doing everything. So it doesn't have every feature out of the box that I quite need, but it gives you all the tools and it makes it readily, easily customizable. It enables you to do that. As far as Ruby projects, they usually have pretty skimpy documentation, but Jekyll has just the right docs and just the right places. So.
Yeah, and again, I think it has a sizable user base that is present on the internet. So like I said, I found Stack Overflow super helpful. People have written a lot of really helpful plugins. So like I said, I was trying to find the category page thing, and someone had written one. And it was just a matter of trying 3 or 4 of them out until I found one that worked how I wanted it to. So yeah, does that all make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a command line thing, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Yeah, that is drawbacks or something that people complain about, just because then you have to be familiar with the command line. Like my mom couldn't go make a Jekyll site, which
it's like a catch-22. Like if you're comfortable with the command line, it's amazing and it's super easy to get started.
Yeah.
But there's that initial step 0 of being comfortable in the command line. I haven't reached that yet. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be a hurdle, but
big way to learn command line stuff.
there you go. Good way to learn.
And so then by comparison, I think something that the Pelican does really well. I personally find it really easy to use. That might just be because I'm like really partial to Python, and I've been using it for a really long time, so it's kind of intuitive at this point. So definitely don't get me wrong, I'm pretty biased here, but I think Pelican is a little bit easier in some ways than Jekyll. For instance, it's really easy to theme. You basically just include a directory that has templates and static files like CSS and images. And then you specify in the configuration file, like, hey, I have a theme, it's right here. And Pelican's like, okay. So like, that's pretty awesome. It has very thorough documentation. It's just a like read the docs style kind of site, and it definitely has a lot more material than Jekyll, but conversely it does not have a very good like web presence. So pretty much if you don't find it in the documentation, I would go to the GitHub and file an issue, or even just talk to the guy who runs it, Justin Mayer. He's a really awesome human. He will definitely help you, but like you're probably not going to find what you're looking for on Stack Overflow or any other kind of forum. What else? It has a lot of settings. Like there is a whole page in the docs with, I would guess, close to 50 at least configurations that you can make in your config file. From like how you want your dates formatted to your URLs to how you want your pages to be generated, whether you want to create a tag page, like I said, like that, a page where it lists all the tags and then all the posts that have that tag, stuff like that. Pretty much anything you can think of is probably in the config file. If it's not though, this is definitely one of the cons of Pelican. If it's not, it's a little bit difficult to add your own functionality. So it does not have that nice plugin functionality that Jekyll does. You would pretty much have to like submit a pull request to Pelican's main repository. I think those are most of the bigger points. Again, another thing that's a con, and I should add the one that I just said, but another thing that I found really tricky is it is non-trivial to use with GitHub in a group. So I tried to make a Pelican site for OSU Security Club, and it has been not disastrous, but pretty rough, just because generating files and including source files in the same directory is not really easy, and it can lead to some problems. So like the really weird way I had it for a while was like I just had 2 repositories, one of which was the generated content and one of which was source files. Which is pretty. So use with caution. Or you can just deploy a different way. Like Pelican can be deployed, like Eli was saying, in just your own, it's yours like on DigitalOcean or.
If you're willing to just manage your own server, they're both equally deployable. I found. Basically, you just build a site and then you soft link or like copy the build files, like the static HTML and CSS and images that it generates, and you just copy that to wherever your website looks for content.
Yeah. So yeah, it's as easy as just establishing a symlink, and then whatever you build will be piped into your meet. I don't know. That's kind of voodoo magic to me at this point, but
it's voodoo magic. The person that wrote it is like.
But if you are using GitHub pages, beware. It might be a little difficult. That's just something that I found in using it. So things that both static site generators do well. One is working out of the box. Both of them are definitely meant to be like, I want a site right now, make it for me. And they'll just walk you through. Both of them have like an initial setup where they'll ask you like what theme you want, what your site's called, who's the author, all that good stuff. If you do not want to touch CSS or anything like that, they both look pretty okay. Like, it's not the prettiest thing you've ever seen, but like it'll definitely get the job done. What else? Both of them are open source on GitHub and accepting pull requests. So both of them are very active, pretty widely used.
Do they have access? They should.
Pelican does. I imagine Jekyll does.
Yeah.
Does.
So another way to contact people is just on IRC.
Yeah. They both make projects very easy to maintain because you don't have to. Well, I don't know. Static sites in general, I think, are pretty easy to maintain because it's basically a bunch of flat files. So it's like really you just keep adding new stuff. And I guess if you get way too many HTML files, which that would be like in the millions probably, you'd have to start deleting them. But that's pretty unrealistic. Both of them have development servers, which makes it really easy to see how your site is being developed. So, oh, okay, a development server is this really cool thing. Basically, it's like a little mini server, kind of, that comes with the tool itself. So Jekyll and Pelican both have one. Basically, with both of them, you run like Jekyll serve or Pelican serve, and they will turn your box into its own server and serve the files so that you can access them in your browser through usually like port 4000 or 5000 or something. And then as you change the content, it will just automatically update it without you having to like manually rebuild the site. So it'll watch your files, automatically rebuild, and then you can just see all those files in your browser pretty much instantly. Does that idea of a development server kind of make sense to people? So like instead of having to do the whole like XAMPP business that I had to do the first time I did this, it's just a really easy like run a command and it works. And then you can, like I said, not have to regenerate every time you make a change. They both work with SAS under structured text. Again, this is something that's really specific to me. But these are both tools that I knew I wanted/needed to use. And they work with them. And there's Harry Styles, looking sassy. The biggest strike against static site generators, and Pelican and Jekyll, but also more broadly static site generators, is that they're not really easy for non-computer people. And that's pretty much what all four of these points boil down to, really. Like there's no graphical user interface for you to enter new content into, unless I guess you're using GitHub, but then you're just using GitHub's graphical user interface, which is kind of, it's a hack job. Like I said, my mom could not make a static site, which is fine, it keeps me employed. But like ideally, and hopefully it's something in the future, I think that one thing that they're kind of working towards is making it so that non-technical people can create their own websites. And also it's non-trivial to include dynamic content, but like that's what makes it a static site. So, this is just a cute little XKCD about like how to find if things are going wrong for non-technical people. So in conclusion, in comparing these two static site generators, using a static site generator, it really depends on what your needs are, and that kind of goes back to the beginning. There's pros and cons for everything. Funny how that works. So like assess what you want out of your site, what your skills are. Like, do you need your site to be in a certain language or to use certain tools like SAS under structured text, or maybe a different markup language? And just kind of weigh like what do all the static site generators do well? What do they sell themselves on? And yeah. So if Jekyll and Pelican do not float your boat, there are actually 387 as of this morning, that's actually the one I'm going to use next, I think. These are listed according to prettiness of their documentation site. And then there are hundreds more. I actually found 2 lists that claim to be the canonical exhaustive list of all static site generators.
Really the same.
They were distinct. One was alphabetical and the other was by popularity. One was a lot prettier than the other. I put the prettier one first. So, but yeah. So you have a lot of options is basically what I'm saying. So if you do your research, you can probably find one that is perfect. The end.
Can you do a quick demo of your just out of the box Jekyll site?
Yeah. So let's deactivate that. Okay. That work. And I guess I can just scroll a little as we go. Anyway, so let's take a look at the Jekyll docs and see just kind of like an example of the process and like really how kind of easy it is to start your first site. So I already have Jekyll installed, obviously, but it's really easy. If you already have Ruby set up, then it's literally just gem install Jekyll and it should work. So then
one thing to consider with Jekyll is that it's based in Ruby, which has very fast. There's like a hassle to get 1.9.2. Ruby has a thing where every year they completely deprecate the previous year's version of Ruby. So they just don't support anything older than a year. So keep that in mind. Not that Ruby's bad, it's used by like a ton of people in the industry, but if you have a problem, it probably isn't Jekyll's problem, it's probably Ruby's problem. And there will be plenty of posts online where people complain that Ruby's broken.
yes,
So you will have support for that. Just keep that in mind.
both emotional and technical.
Isn't there like a way to make Ruby run in a certain version also?
Yes, it's
RVM.
called the
Or something else.
beat me to it. Yeah, it's called the Ruby Version Manager or RVM. And yeah, then you can use older versions. I think 1.9.3 is one that I see pretty frequently,
Yeah.
which I think now they're on like 2 point something.
Yeah. The industry kind of standardizes. It says, okay, we're going to use this one for a while.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible to stay up to date.
And then things will not break because you can say like, hey, computer, I want to use this version of Ruby for this project. And it'll be like, okay. And RVM will ensure that it uses that version and that things work. So yes.
Once you get RVM set up, it's as simple as saying RVM use 1.9.3. And then that'll just be the version of Ruby you're using. So, yeah.
Well, that's handy then. And if they're updating that much like you're saying.
It's not as bad as I said.
But I mean, if you're using enough, some other project like that too, it makes sense too, because then you can see like where they're at in their development, and then just set your, environment up for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the syntax for creating a new site is just Jekyll new test site. And you can find that on their front page. And then we'll go to test site. And you can see that this is all the automatic files / directories that it automatically adds. So about.md is an example of a markdown file, specifically a non-post markdown file. So it's intended to be a page that is, well, like every page is static.
But it's,
yeah. It's intended to be a page that isn't part of the post category of pages. It's an about page essentially. And it is also though an example of what your post pages will look like. Like if you don't know Markdown, or kind of like Jekyll flavored Markdown, which this kind of is, like the front matter, then it's a good example to just pop open and be like, wait, how do I do that thing again? And I'll open it in a few minutes. This is your config file. It's YAML, whether that's good or bad. That's where your CSS is. Feed.xml is for making an RSS feed, so that people can add you to their RSS feeds. Underscore includes is, so when you have a templating system, a lot of times you will have pieces of HTML that are included in all of your HTML files. For instance, a menu or a footer, your head stuff.
Or like a sidebar.
Usually stuff like that. That'll go in underscore includes. So the stuff that gets included in your page. Layouts is specific HTML layouts. So those are the actual templates usually. Usually you'll just need one. It's probably default.html. But if you do need more, like if you want your about page to look different than your post page, then you can do that. Underscore Sass is for Sass. And then this is where your posts will go. One cool thing that I learned the other day was that you can actually have subdirectories that are categories, and then within them have underscore posts. And you do not need to define the category for those posts. It will automatically be categorized as the directory that's in. So I know that might not make sense if you've never used one of these before, but basically like you can use directories to tag your pages instead of having to manually tag them, which is pretty freaking cool. Yeah. And then index.html is your homepage. So let's take a look at this about.md. So the three dashes and then the information between is Jekyll's way of providing information about your page. Every static site / markup pairing will have its own way of doing this. Like in Pelican, it looks pretty similar, honestly. You basically have like the title with a bunch of equal signs underneath it, and then you define like slug : what you want the slug to be, URL, what you want the URL to be, etc. The way that they do it is with the top three dashes, you define which layout you want to use, a title for your page, and then the permalink is optional, but it's essentially giving it a URL, which is what the permalink is. You can add lots of other information to that. So that's kind of where it defines. These are really the only two that are necessary. And then here's some other things that are default in Jekyll that you can add. So category, or if you have multiple categories, any tags you want to add, whether you want to actually publish it or not. You can also add custom variables, blah, blah. So that's kind of what this, like, they call it front matter. That's what this whole little thing is. And this is basically just your content. You just write it in Markdown. This is an example of a link. Yeah. And then it will just throw your content in there. So let's try. Let me make this bigger. And it's not gonna wrap. Okay, yay. So do that Jekyll serve business. And you can see right here, the server address is 107.0.1, serving out of port 4000. And this is our new Jekyll site. Is that easy, right? Yeah? Pretty cool, huh? Oh my gosh, so exciting. So this is the default site. It has your host and title, list of posts, other cool stuff like that, Twitters, and here we can see the about page. We can see like this is where it just throws all the content. And if we were to change any of the content in the about.md, it would show up right there. Maybe I will. So let's just delete that whole thing. Save it. It'll automatically regenerate. So that's what. And if it errors, it will show you errors there. So it'll say like, you made a change and I don't like it. Like your SAS file doesn't work or what have you. Let me just refresh. It changed. Oh my god. Yeah. Are there any questions? I seem less awestruck than I was hoping. Hey. All right. Thank you.